This is 5.9, day 2 for Algebra 2. Our focus today is on multiplying and dividing with complex numbers. Yesterday we focused on adding and subtracting complex numbers. So just go ahead and write the title down. All right, here's our first set of examples. We want to multiply these complex numbers together. So we're going to start with example A. We're going to multiply 4i to the complex number 2 plus 2i. So think of this as like the distributive property, where we want to distribute 4i to the 2 and then 4i to the 2i. So we take 4i times 2 plus 4i times 2i. When you multiply imaginary numbers with like parts. So the like parts is the 4 times 2 is 8, and then I. Then we go over to the second, we multiply like parts, so 4 times 2 is 8, and then I times I is I squared. Now remember earlier in your notes that I squared can be replaced with -1. So now 8 times -1 is -8. Now in standard form we want to have the real part go first, then the imaginary. Now it's in standard form for that complex number. Example B is multiplying these two complex numbers together. So we're going to use the distributive property again. And think of this as foiling. So we're going to multiply 2 times -5. Then we're going to multiply 2 times -3i. Then we'll distribute the I. So I times -5. And then I times -3i. Some of you could maybe do this in your head and go right on to the next step. So 2 times -5 is -10. Then the green one, we multiply like parts, so 2 times -3 is -6, and then I. The red is -5 times I, so we get -5i. And then like parts with the black is -3 times +1 is -3, and then I times I is I squared. Now we can combine like terms in the middle. So we have -10, and then -6i minus 5 are those like terms. This is now -11i. And remember what happens with the I squared. You replace that I squared with -1. So now -3 times -1 is a +3. Bring down the first two terms. And now we have like terms again. -10 plus 3 is -7. Now it's in standard form. -7 minus 11i. Here's another example where we're going to multiply. So maybe question C, you want to just listen and watch. So we're going to FOIL again. We'll maybe do it a little faster now. So 6 times 5 is 30. times negative 4i is negative 24i. Negative 4i times 5 is negative 20i. And then negative 4i times negative 4i is a negative times a negative is a positive 16, and then I squared. Now we can combine like terms in the middle. So negative 24i minus 20i is negative 44i. And what I tell students after they get comfortable with I squared is that you can't just drop the I squared and change the sign. Because remember, I squared is negative 1. So I'm going to drop the I squared and change it to a negative 16. Now I have like terms again. 30 minus 16 is 14. And then minus 44i. Next example, D. Maybe this one you want to write down. It's a little bit more difficult because it has a radical. So question D is saying, take 2 plus I squareds of 3 and multiply it to itself. So what we have is two parentheses. We have 2 plus I squareds of 3 times 2 plus I squareds of 3. You have to be very careful with radicals here. And now we're going to FOIL again. So we're going to multiply 2 times 2, which is 4. We're going to multiply 2 times I squareds of 3. So we get 2I squareds of 3. Then we multiply I squareds of 3 times 2. We get 2I squareds of 3. And then we multiply I squareds of 3 times I squareds of 3. I'm just going to write those two down as parentheses for right now. So I squareds of 3 times I squareds of 3. Now notice we have like terms again with these two. They're considered like terms because I have radicals that are alike. They're both square root of 3. So the rule is we add their coefficients. So their coefficients are 2i and 2i. So 2i plus 2i is 4i. And then the radical just comes along for the ride, is what we say in math. And I'm bringing down that 4. So 2i squareds of 3 plus 2i squareds of 3 is 4i squareds of 3. Now, in the black, I have I squareds of 3 times I squareds of 3. So we multiply like parts together. I times I is I squared. And then square root of 3 times square root of 3. If you remember, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. And we still have that I squared. I'm going to bring down the 4 and bring down the 4i squareds of 3. Now from that example that we just did, remember what I said about the I squared? You can drop the I squared and change the sign. So now it's a negative 3. Bring down the first two terms. And now like terms exist again. 4 minus 3 is 1 plus 4i squareds of 3. I'm going to stop the recording there and go on to our last topic, is dividing complex numbers.